No.
Okay, we're up on YouTube.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this special meeting of the Mahone Bay Town Council. All the members of council are here, as well as some of the key staff members. And in particular, welcome to the people at home who may be joining us on YouTube. Council, you have an agenda that was emailed to you. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented, or would you wish an amendment? Moved by the Deputy Mayor to approve the agenda, seconded by Councillor Carver. All in favor of the agenda as presented? Thank you. The agenda only has the one item, that is the application to the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative. Mr. Hyde, would you like to open the discussion, please?
Yes, thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. So just a quick recap. We had a regular council meeting last week. Time really flies by. We had a regular council meeting on the 25th of February. And while there was no item on the agenda for discussion of this request for support for an application to the Healthy Communities Fund, the timeline is very tight. It came up in the public input session ahead of the meeting that there was a group that was looking to make such an application. And so council had the opportunity, in consideration of other correspondence from the same organization, which is to say the Mahone Bay Center and Mahone Bay United Soccer, to schedule this meeting as an opportunity to consider the request for support for the Healthy Communities application. And I did have an opportunity to meet with the proponents and go over the application. Council has had the application in draft form, and an updated draft form was distributed yesterday. I did include some consideration from staff as requested. Given the time frame, that was just by email, so I'm happy to dig into it more, but I'm not going to go over all of it again now unless asked. So what is in front of us today is a request for a letter of support, but more broadly speaking, support for the proposed improvements to the sports field adjacent to the Mahone Bay Center. So hopefully that provides some context. Happy to answer any questions.
If I could, how long has the call for applications to the program been in the public realm?
I attended a webinar on this one earlier in February when it was launched, but it certainly was only a couple of weeks ago now,
Okay.
mid-February.
Thank you. Okay, anyone have any observations or comments or questions, please? Councillor Feeney?
Mayor, I think I'll just lead off the conversation and try not to monopolize the time, because I know we only really have another 50 minutes or so, and I think every councillor could probably talk for an hour on the nuances of this proposal. And I'm really struggling with this, to be honest. And I think that's pretty clear to many of you who I've spoken with, including the proponents in the last few days. Fundamentally, if council provides support through a letter, effective, and the proposal is approved, and the project gets funded, and it gets flawlessly executed, I do think everyone would agree that it would be a material improvement to the field, and it would increase the utility for the community. I think there's no question about that. But fundamentally, what that also does is that also essentially codifies the long-term use of the field as for recreation. And while there may be quite a bit of well-rounded support for that, including, I think, support from council potentially to do that, not everybody in the community agrees with that approach. So what we're losing is the opportunity to have an informed debate where the multiple perspectives are brought to the table in some kind of a logical process that would bring into consideration land use bylaws, the change of the zoning for that property, and what I would just call like standard appropriate process for a change of use. So colloquially, and I even heard the CAO just mention it, we do call it the sports field, but it's actually not, it's sports field in use, not sports field in classification. And so I'm open-minded, as you all know, about having that discussion about whether that should be the long-term use of the property. And I think there's lots of people who think that's the way that's what we should do. But I'm a little worried about the precedent that would get set if we simply jump over all those bureaucratic procedures to essentially just go collect $200 and fast forward ahead, and this is what we're doing. And I think it's also somewhat troubling that we just do not have the terms and conditions. We just don't have the T's and C's crossed yet. So I'm struggling to know if what the right thing to do is here. And those are sort of my preliminary thoughts, Mayor, on the topic.
Thank you, Councillor Feeney. Anyone else? Councillor Now, you had your hand up.
Yes, I'm struggling with it too, because it's unfortunate we didn't have more time for this application, but I'm sort of hesitant to supply support for that. Like Councillor Feeney says, it takes away anything else from that field. And it's a decision that if we make that now, then we're more or less saying, okay, we're going to designate that field as recreational, that type of thing. And we really haven't had a chance to discuss it. Also, in our strategic planning sessions, stuff like that, it's been brought up so much about affordable housing and stuff like that. If we take away this property and we take away some other properties, then where does that leave the town with any facilities to move forward and to grow the town? I think if we're going to designate this as recreational, we need more time. And as we found out in the past, the public is really more interested in these things than what we think. And I think that we should be involving them more with the discussion on doing that. So unfortunately, I don't know that we have enough time really to support this application with the time frame that we've been given. It's too bad that the applications come out for these things and they give them such a short period of time to apply and to for the approval.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson's next, and then Councillor Carver.
I'm not on mute. Yay. Couple of things. Well, first of all, we've been talking about this field for at least 19 years. So the notion of not having enough time seems to me a kind of a false argument. But I am curious about one thing, and perhaps the Deputy Mayor can answer this in the absence of Tim Mary. And that is, I've always wondered why, in the interest of having multi-use fields, this money wouldn't be better spent converting the existing ball diamond into a ball diamond and soccer pitch at the same time. There's room. It's logistically makes sense because it's in that same area where the tennis courts, swimming pools, and the park and so on are. And it just occurs to me that that might be a better way to direct the funds. If there's some technical reason or other reason that I'm not aware of for not doing something like that, then I would say that I'm in favor of the project as it stands, with the proviso that it's a 5-year deal with a 5-year renewable option that's amenable to both parties.
Okay, Deputy Mayor. I'm sorry, no, Councillor Carver was next. Yes, please. And then we'll go to the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. My sense is that the urgency here is not the town's urgency. The urgency belongs to the proponents, who are hoping to meet a March 9th deadline. The Healthy Communities Initiative has a a May deadline as well. So I'm not personally feeling any urgency to act on this request in order to meet a March 9th deadline. Beyond that, I find the whole situation is so murky in terms of who is responsible for what. And the idea that an agreement would somehow be developed after the fact, it doesn't sit well with me at all. And I echo and support Councillor Feeney's concerns about change of use and going through due process and correct process, because it's the process we have at this time. So for those reasons, I can't support the request as it stands.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Kangata?
Yeah, I think the bottom line is council has had like all those years, 20 years to have this conversation. Council has never taken leadership to have that conversation. So the community and folks involved in the community who have an interest in using the field want to ensure that at least some conversation is had and a decision is made. Now, this opportunity to create or improve the field comes at a time when that decision has not been made, not for lack of interest in the community to have that decision made, but because council has kicked this ball down the road over the years and has failed to provide leadership. So I think, to be fair to what the community has always wanted, is for council to make a decision. On the aspect of the rush to beat this deadline, the primary reason is that because.
Excuse me, go ahead.
Okay, because of the way the call came out, and having spoken to the funding organization, is there's a greater chance if the application goes in the first round than if it goes in the second round. So from a community perspective, we stand a better chance in this chunk of funding to get the funding to improve that space. Now, fair enough, there's the process and due diligence and what needs to be done process-wise. Council can take time to do that. Whether or not this funding comes through. If I like the suggestion that Kelly has put forward there around 5 years, kind of a principal agreement that the improvements will be done. Council will have 5 years to evaluate how things are going and make a decision. That's great, but the bottom line, I think, council has ideas about the field. They've never made a decision about how that property is, and have assumed that, I think for many reasons, that growth will happen or development and change will happen by itself rather than providing leadership as to how that is going. I think we need to provide leadership, and my suggestion would be great opportunity to work with a community group. We've always talked about, can we use the community sort of as our guide in how these things go? And the community wants this. The fact that 85 kids and their parents and those who are associated are benefiting from what Mahombe United is doing is a very clear indicator that if you allow for space and create these things, it will grow. And the town is growing as a result of that. So I find it very, honestly, to be very, very disappointing that we are waffling around an issue where we can just provide clear direction, support this thing. If down the road we're talking about housing development, talk about how can we do housing development, even with that field being the way it is, because I think it's possible. The ideas can be put on the table, but we've not provided that particular, I guess, kind of leadership on that issue. So I would urge you folks to not use bureaucratic process and things that I guess we've created as council to be a blockage to bringing in funds to the community and to improving a field that in many ways community wants to use it as a recreational field. Whether we feel that's the way we want to use it or not, but the community, that's what they want. And they've shown in many ways. I think there are many iterations of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Burdick and then CAO.
I do agree that this has been a very fast process and presentation, but I do think that it is also true that this field has been used practically. Its practical application is as a sports field. Its designation is maybe not recreational, or it isn't, but its practical use is recreational. And there is already a working collaborative group that is managing it with the town. So we have the precedence of management already there. I would think that it's a very positive thing for the town, and that I do like Councillor Wilson's also suggestion of a point at which it can be reassessed. We haven't had those other discussions about what it could possibly otherwise be, but we can see what it is right now. So it does seem like a wonderful opportunity. Funding opportunities don't come up all the time. Windows, like things don't intersect properly all the time. So I do think it's a chance to fulfill some of our working pillars right now also that we're discussing. In terms of our strategic plan. I feel like it would fit in very well with our ideas of accessibility and having, inclusive growth for the town. Thank you.
Thank you. CAO.
Just two very quick little factual things I can add that might help people reference things I want to respond to. The 5-year term for an agreement. I just wanted to note that under the donations policy, and I referenced this in my previous email, we would need a donation agreement to receive these assets if this is being done by a third-party group. So the minimum term of an agreement to maintain those assets would be 5 years under our policy. So we would be looking at a minimum 5-year agreement on the maintenance of the assets that would result from the project if we did it. And then just with respect to the program and the intake dates, Deputy Mayor spoke to it, but I just wanted to note that I also have an understanding from the funding partners that while there are 2 windows, it is quite likely that they will be oversubscribed in the first window and carry over applications from that one. And it will be probably much more difficult to get. I mean, I'm not, I don't have a high level of confidence in this project being funded anyway, but even if it were to go in, I think it will be proportionally less likely to get funded in the May intake. And I just wanted to note with respect to the May intake, it was noted on the staff report on the bandstand engagement plan two meetings ago, I think, that if we were in a position, we would apply to the Healthy Communities Fund for that work as well. And it's probably about $10,000. It's much smaller work, but we were looking at the May intake for that because we haven't gone through the engagement process. So, the town may also have a small application. And just to clarify, we are absolutely allowed to still make that application, even if we provided a letter of support for this, either in this intake or in the next intake. So just some context.
Thank you. I would offer a comment. The old field was substantially used, and the use was primarily for soccer. The key organizer of that was a resident of the town at the time, has been inducted into the Nova Scotia Sports Hall of Fame as a soccer builder, and he's about to be inducted into the Canadian Sports Hall of Fame as a soccer builder. He was of the opinion that the field we're talking about, now this is up until about 6 or 7 years ago, was one of the best soccer pitches in Atlantic Canada. Now, over time, we may have developed some problems with it, but that soccer organization fell by the wayside. It became increasingly difficult to find enough youth interested to join the programs. And I think, counter to what the deputy mayor has suggested around the lack of leadership, that soccer field has been front and center for town councils, certainly since 2008. And it's the issue of usage, the number of people using it, and what they used it for that kind of dictated how much focus council was giving to the field. It was mowed, it was groomed, it was line marked, whatever, when people wanted to use it. But to now spend in a very quick motion $80,000, or to ask for $80,000 to work on the field. I was at an asset management meeting last week when we talked about the 2 high priority maintenance items for the town. Number 2 was the wharf. Number 1 was the swimming pool, and the need to rebuild, to renovate, maybe even replace the swimming pool that we have now. So if the town is going to pursue federal funding to the tune of $80,000, I think we have other projects in the priority string that we might want to consider before we would consider the investment in the soccer field and the other pieces of kit that go with it. Deputy Mayor.
I just want to point out, it's not the town applying. The town, if the town wanted to apply, they could have applied, well, based on their, I guess, priorities. This is not the town applying. It's residents of the town with the Mahombe Center applying. So I don't see how that those two things for me are, I guess, a bit different from that perspective.
Okay. How many of the people in your program are residents of the town, Deputy Mayor?
We don't take that into consideration. We just offer programs and allow folks who are who kind of attend. Those who are in town who want to attend come. Those who are from out do come. So we don't track who's a resident and who's not.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, did I see your hand up?
You did. Just a small rebuttal to the mayor's remarks about, I understand the priority, and I applaud the notion of taking a hard look at the swimming pool, because I think it's definitely time. However, as far as I know, there is no impetus and no group getting organized to make a presentation to this federal organization for funds. And I'm very concerned about, we seem to be able to find all kinds of ways to throw roadblocks in front of people who are trying to get things done. And frankly, I see no downside to this. If we sign off on a letter of support for a group who wants to go and get $80,000 or $85,000 from another level of government to make an existing facility better for the community and run it for us for 5 years. I mean, for the last at least 10 years, it's been nothing but a fancy dog latrine, basically. So I applaud the notion that it's people out there that want to actually use it for something that is a cut above that. I worry that we as a council seem to have a fail-safe approach of, when in doubt, do nothing. Let's kick it down the road and talk about it later. And I see no reason not to approve this now.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
And maybe just to point out, it's not even approving the project. We're just saying provide a letter of support to say we're okay with this. For me, that's I don't know why it feels as if there's so many strings tied to it for council. I understand the implicit support for how the field will be used, but it's a community asking. It's folks in the community who've shown that they really want to improve facilities in the community. And this, for me, is just, in many ways, tests in many ways to show that that council can be supportive of many other things. So you never know. Even the community may come back and sort of say, well, let's look at that swimming pool. What can we do about it? And come to you with the same request. So there is a lot of, I guess, a messaging that's coming out of the deliberations we're having, and also our, I guess, struggle with working with community groups. So I would urge council to maybe reevaluate this with that lens in mind.
Councillor Feeney?
So I agree, there is some messaging, and there's also some challenges, and there's some struggles that I think the council's dealing with. And the messaging is that this is a government, and we have fiduciary duties to all the taxpayers in the town to manage and be stewards of the taxpayers' assets and the community's assets. So when you don't follow due process, you don't provide, you don't provide a clean path forward to move an agenda along, you end up in a situation where we have complexity, and that's essentially where we are. I don't think this is, in my mind, a debate about the merits of the upgrade of the soccer field. This isn't even, in my mind, a debate about whether the town council should get on board with codifying the field as green space and recreation. All I'm suggesting is that if that's where the majority council is, I'm open-minded to having the conversation, but I do think that it's difficult to have that conversation. This essentially replaces that conversation. This is essentially eliminates the opportunity for consultation with the community about that discussion. So while we think that some community members want that to happen, I can assure you there are lots of community members who aren't on board with that. So, I think I agree with Councillor Wilson. There's no downside. Let's face it, upgrading the soccer field is going to be a community improvement. I think it's illogical to say that it wouldn't be. Clearly, an upgrade of the facility will improve the overall asset mix for the community. My struggle is the unintended consequences of saying, I like this idea. I'm just not going to follow any of the bureaucracy because I just want to go and circumvent the bureaucracy and do what I want to do because I think this is a good idea. And I agree. This is an upgrade to the community, but 6 months from now, we could have another community group with another proponent. They want to do something else on a town asset. And I'm just suggesting, like, we have a PAC, we have town planners, we have town engineers. And when we make a decision about a town asset, we have to be somewhat vigilant in our approach. And so it's not just a matter of saying town council, town council supports it, we write a letter and move it along. Like there are impacts of us moving along without any process. So I agree. It's it's no fun to follow the bureaucracy. We can't get what we want done. But if you decide you're not going to follow the processes anymore, boy, oh boy, I could see a very different tone to a very different meeting down the road. So I have worries about this. Not that we're building the soccer field. It has nothing to do with the submission. It has to do, in my mind, wholly with the process. And I don't know. I'm really struggling with what to do on this one.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carver and then Councillor Burdick.
Yes, I share the struggle. And I do have concerns about the presentation coming on, that the community wants this, because Councillor Feeney has said there are other groups or in the community who might want something different. And in fact, we can with some certainty understand that there are groups in the town who want something different for this piece of property. And the point is well taken that the deputy mayor pointed out, well, and two other councillors as well, that the council has lagged on this issue because it is and has been such a controversial issue. The town was split apart in a seriously hurtful way in 2008 around this issue. And I think that we have been very nervous about coming at it again. And this discussion, in fact, has led to me feeling that it's time for council to address that issue about the use of that field, the old school field. I won't call it a community field because it's not. It's a field that is behind the old school, the Mahone Bay Center. So that's, I find I'm struggling because that was a very, very painful issue in 2008. And it lives on, and every time in council that there has been an allusion to the field, I've quaked in my shoes because it's on record, again, as I said at the last meeting, that I totally supported the retention of that area for recreation purposes. That being said, I also recognize the need for affordable housing in our town, and that piece of land could, as a town asset, is absolutely a piece of land that could be considered as a land bank that the town could donate for nonprofit housing to develop housing on that property. So I'm totally conflicted about it. And because I'm conflicted, I cannot support the proposal, even for the 5 years, because there's an implicit commitment there from the town, I believe. I'll yield the floor now. Thank you. I'm sure I've used up my 2 minutes worth.
Thank you. Councillor Burdick?
Yes, there hasn't been a proper discussion, certainly, of what town assets or other situations would be used for public housing. There hasn't actually even been a proper discussion about the town agreeing to do this. There's a general agreement that it's necessary, but again, that's also another thing that has been, under consideration for many, many years. To me, it really, I am I am absolutely a proponent of affordable housing and situations for this. What I'm seeing is that in the absence of that discussion about and agreement about what this land would be properly called, it has been used. It's sort of been used in a really natural way. And that has sort of, to me, it determines I'm not the town. I'm one person, and there are people who agree with me. There are people who agree with all of us here at the table, I believe, for sure. There are differing opinions. But the view that I have is that this is what it's being used as. We already have two different entities who have been very effectively managing it for the town, essentially. And this natural progression has happened. It is simply a letter, similar to me to the letter that was that came from the motion that council had April 25th, 2019, to support to support the Mahone Bay United. It's a practical way of support of enforcing that support, to have a place that is like, this is where you do it. We are not providing the funding. We would be saying in the letter, yeah, this is what this is being used for. Go ahead and apply for funding. Again, it doesn't mean the funding is going to come in. Often that's the case with funding applications. This is a really good way of opening this for discussion, though. Clearly, if you all feel And I'm absolutely in agreement. But if this then necessitates a survey, for example, of the people saying, what do you think of this space? What do you like it the way it's being used? Are you in agreement with that? That's a really helpful thing. If you actually really do want to engage the public and see what people think, I'm all for it. But to me, this is the public asking us for our support in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Counselor Now.
Yeah, I'm still conflicted. I don't think as it stands, I can support this motion. Well, there is no motion yet, actually. But a question for maybe the deputy mayor can answer it. So what if the government comes through and says, okay, we'll give you 35,000 of the 86 that you need? Where is the other money's coming from? I know they say they're going to do it through fundraising, et cetera, but I really don't see anything to substantiate where the extra money might come from should they have a shortfall. And I really don't want to see it all of a sudden saying you provided a letter of support. Where's town council going to come in and support this? I don't want it falling back to the town in that regard.
Well, I think in the proposal, there's no mention of us coming back to council to ask for money. And we specifically would not even want to come back to council to ask for money. I think we will fundraise, and I think it's doable for us to fundraise. We're confident that we'll be able to raise any extra funds that will be required. So I don't think that I'm even trying to figure out why that that would be a stumbling block, but I guess fair enough, you've asked it. We're planning to fundraise, similar to the way the firemen are planning to fundraise. We would do the same. We're not asking the council to do anything. In fact, in my approach, in as much as I'm part of that initiative, I'm also on council too. I don't want, and I know that we have minimal funds for other stuff. I'm not envisioning that we want to ask for more funds from council for this. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question, Richard.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Carver.
My question now is about the estimates that were provided in the proposal. I'm curious to know, and this is a question for the CAO, I'm recognizing that the deputy mayor is a proponent in the project, so I'm going to deliberately address my question to the CAO. Can you tell us more about the cost estimates and how they were done, and whether there was consultation with the town, and how the estimates were prepared? Were engineers consulted? Just some information about that would help me understand better how, logistically, how this project proposal came to this point and how it might unfold afterwards. Who's going to do the work, for example? Did the estimates include labor? How does all that look?
CAO, would you like to respond?
With your permission? Yeah, well, I mean, the time frame has been very tight on this, so I will certainly specify that the estimates were provided by the proponents and that I haven't seen anything to break them down in detail beyond what you guys have been provided with. I did ask the question. You know, we did have a discussion about the preparation. I'm convinced that they've been prepared by the kind of recreational contractors that we would go to for the work. The bigger question for me having to do with the drainage one. You know, I did raise with the proponents that, you know, we know, Derek and I, a lot about the history of the drainage of that property and how it's used. It doesn't just drain the field, it's part of our stormwater management system for that whole neighborhood. And it doesn't function very well right now. So this is an opportunity, honestly, to improve the way it functions, which we have to do anyway. But that being said, there probably is a need to revisit those estimates at some point. The town's cost, in addition to what the cost for the field would be, would be costs that we would otherwise have to accommodate to get that drainage system up and running. So I noted by email that, if anything, the remediation of the field, if we could time this right, could be relieved from those other projects, because we would do that work and then this project come along and resurface and get it all nice and level. So from that perspective, there's probably an advantage, but no, I haven't really had time. And going forward, what we would do if they did get approval is Derek and I would absolutely have to work with these contractors. There would be no, shovels in the ground until the town signs off on any work. But because this is a third-party project, we would not be involved in the tendering process. So we can consult on the nature of the work, and certainly we would have to approve any work that actually happens. But in terms of the tendering, we wouldn't be involved, for better or worse. Yeah, makes it faster.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to have a motion now to focus our attention a little bit.
Okay.
I'd like to move that council agree to provide a letter of support to the Mahone Bay United and the Mahone Bay Center in their efforts to receive funding from the Healthy Communities Initiative for the improvement of the surplus land adjacent to Mahone Bay Center, historically used as a soccer field.
Okay. Seconded by the deputy mayor.
Mayor, just a question on the, I think that's a really elegantly crafted motion, because it combines the nuance of the existing classification with, and I do believe that motion does give a little bit of space so that council can enter into a process where more deliberate conversations could unfold about the long-term use of that quote unquote surplus space. So, I think, if I was talking to someone on the street corner tomorrow and I needed to give them my kind of 2 cents on what the tone of this conversation was, in my mind, I don't think there's, I think this is more about, can council be supportive without the kind of due diligence and process that we would normally expect when we have a very significant policy change on a particular town asset. So, but I do think that Councillor Wilson's, I do think that motion does give council more flexibility to have that discussion in a structured way. So, I'm more inclined to move this along rather than, because I do think we're just going to be back here 2 weeks from now, if in the event that the council turns this away today. Because, so I'd feel more comfortable with that particular motion that absolutely makes it crystal clear that the existing criteria that the land falls in is currently surplus. I'm not sure what everyone else thinks, but.
David, you're on mute.
My apologies. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I saw you point, but I wasn't sure who you were pointing to. I thank you to Councillor Feeney for his support. One of the things that puzzled me earlier on about this concern about going through the bureaucratic steps that are necessary is I think we need to remind ourselves that we are not changing the designation of the land, nor are we changing the use. So PAC does not enter into this, nor as far as I can see does planning. Everything remains the same except that there will be some remedial work done to the field to make it a more usable asset, which is to everyone's benefit. I think of it, if I were going to put a carpet down here in my office in the basement of the house, I would not get a building permit to do that. It's none of anybody's business.
Councillor Burdick, and then Councillor Carver, and then the deputy mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. And Thank you, Councillor Wilson. That was a really elegantly crafted motion, and I think I agree with Councillor Feeney about that. It does leave some room for future discussion, and I would really encourage us to have those discussions in the not too distant future, because clearly it's something that keeps coming up. It has come up, it's come up so often. It came up during the election. It came up in previous elections, and here it is again. Just the edge of it has necessitated this conversation. So I do really think that maybe this is something that we should be revisiting in the future. But I think that we could move ahead with the support, the general support for this funding application.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carver.
I was going to ask for the motion to be read again.
Thank you. Would you oblige us, Councillor Wilson?
That may be a bit tricky because I might not get the words exactly right.
Well, we
Move
should
that-
probably get Kelly, the other Kelly, to read it to make sure
Oh,
she's got the
perfect.
words right. Yeah.
If she's got it there, awesome.
I'm not 100% sure I have the words right.
That's why
so
we're
we need to
checking.
confirm.
Yeah, that's why we're checking.
We have a recording, so that council agreed to provide a letter of support to Mahone Bay United and the Mahone Bay Center in their efforts to receive funding from the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative for the improvement of the soccer field on surplus property adjacent from the Mahone Bay Center.
I think what I said is the improvement of the surplus land adjacent to the Mahone Bay Center, historically used as a soccer field.
Good. Thanks.
You.
Thanks to you both. We get that clear.
Councillor Carver, you're on mute, Councillor Carver.
Yes, I'm on mute because I'm still thinking. Thank you for the repetition of the motion.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments on the question? Councillor Now.
Oh, still on mute.
Here we
There.
go.
Just wanted to clarify one thing. So if we agree to this and if the proponents get their funding, then we're tied into the field staying as is for 5 years. And then after that, it can be reverted to whatever. Am I correct in that assumption?
CAO?
So the nature of the donation agreement is that we will maintain the assets in place for 5 years. That has to do with the donation. So if there was a significant change to the ownership of the property, I think the donation agreement wouldn't absolutely bind council's hands on that. Most likely we'd have to talk about the residual value of the assets if there was a need to do that. So it's an agreement, but it doesn't mean that there's absolutely no way in which things could change. Things could change.
What is the donation in particular, CAO, that we're referring to as to be affected by the
about
policy?
half of the project is improvement to the property, which can't be distinguished from the property, but the remainder of it is for equipment and installations, bleachers, probably a shed, things like that would be part of the property. It would be retained there. So we would take ownership of those through a donation agreement with the proponents.
So by definition, all of those improvements will be situated on the town's property in that area.
And when we do a donation, like we would say it's a picnic table, we agree that for the 5 years after it's been donated, we'll keep it there and we'll take care of it. So just that's essentially how they work. Yeah.
But if it was something like I think they refer in an equipment storage shed, not unlike the situation we have at the marina, the shed would be on town property and the shed would become the property of the town as a result of the donation.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carver.
Oh, the deputy mayor has been on
I-
the speaking
is-
list
is
for
there-
a while. I just wanted to call your attention to that.
Is there a
Councillor-
reason you don't want me to speak,
Oh, stop.
Mayor?
Oh, wait, please, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Carver was next, please.
No, just a minute. Twice you've said that the deputy mayor, and then you skip me. What's the reason for that? Is there a reason you want me to speak?
If I am skipping you, I apologize, and you will
Point
be
of
the
order.
next. You'll
point,
be the
point,
next
point of
person
order.
after Councillor Carver.
I think everybody in the space has spoken more than they're allowed, 2 minutes, longer than they're allowed 2 minutes, and more frequently than they're allowed
Then they're allowed time.
2 occasions. And
No, just a minute. You want to talk about process, right? So
I have a point.
I-
I'm speaking to the chair of
She's
the
on a
meeting.
point of order.
I'm trying to
Speaking to the
understand.
chair of the meeting on a point of order.
I don't have a gavel to bang,
Yeah,
but the chair has the floor.
okay,
And the chair is ruling on a point of order.
okay.
And the point of order is that Councillor Carver's point will be upheld.
Okay.
Councillor Carver, if you will speak, I will then go to the deputy mayor.
I would like to ask at this point whether there is a way to to bring in the issue of council addressing the zoning of that land. As part of this motion, or could a motion be made at this meeting? Or would it have to go as a notice of motion to a next meeting about that it's time to visit that issue and that it could be visited during this 5-year period? So I'm just asking for an answer on that. Thank you.
Thank you. We will confirm with staff. Councillor Carver, I believe the intent of this meeting is the motion which is now on the floor. We could entertain a notice of motion for the next meeting to talk about the issue that you're referring to. Deputy Mayor, if you please.
So, Mayor, I'm still struggling to understand why you did not allow me to speak, but maybe we'll figure that out another day. What my comments, what I wanted to mention was, I'm glad that Councillor Wilson has put a motion on the table. My hope is that we will not, in the letter, make it in a way that it's support on one hand, but we withdraw the support with what we say, so that basically the letter becomes not very useful for the application. So in how the letter is crafted, I think we need to have the goodwill that we want these monies, if the application is approved, to come to the community. That's basically what I wanted to mention.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Can I suggest we call the question?
Okay, we've called for CAO. The CAO wants to give us an administrative point here before we.
If you'll
respond.
allow me, I just I put my hand up when it was discussed that would it be in order to have a motion following this motion with respect to the zoning of the property. And I just wanted to reiterate, as I had done by email, that the zoning of the property has already been flagged in the Plan Mahone Bay process, and it will be discussed in the consultations in going on in April, May, and June. So, you know, it is coming up, and this may be or may not be approved in the meantime, but no notice would be needed for the zoning to be discussed as a part of the established plan review process. So I just wanted to make that note. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the question on the motion, on the question. Sorry, Councillor Carver. The question's
yes.
been called for.
I know the motion has been called, but the policy is that when the motion has been called, that the chair check to be sure that everybody's had a chance to speak that wishes to speak. And I have one more thing to say, if I may.
It'll be another opportunity for you to speak, but go ahead.
Thank you. I will, with some reluctance, support this motion with the knowledge that the CAO has just provided about the zoning coming up in the Plan Mahone Bay plan review process.
Yeah.
And that I value Councillor Wilson's comments about not being just a square block that immovably in the way of community initiatives. But there have been so many irregularities in this process that it has made me worry that we need to pay attention to our process, not to get in the way of everything, but process is important too. So I will support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, you've heard the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Nobody. Okay. The motion is carried. A letter will be prepared to, a letter of support from the town will go to the Mahone Bay United application. Councillor Carver.
Thank you again. Could we see the letter before it goes, please?
Don't see why not.
Can I respond,
GAO?
Mr. Mayor? Yeah, we'll circulate the letter, but I just want to make it clear that we're not going to be bringing the letter to a meeting. So if individual members of council have thoughts about the composition of that letter, you can share those thoughts, but there is not going to be an opportunity to litigate that. So I'm going to have to provide a letter of support on the basis of this motion. So we will circulate, but it's not going to go on the agenda for another meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. And the closed, the in-camera session piece was canceled. Would entertain a motion to adjourn. Seconded by Councillor Now. The motion's made by Councillor Wilson. All in favor? The motion is carried. We are adjourned.